Good evening. I'm going to do a video that's probably been done hundreds of times and written about hundreds of times, but I think I have a little bit of something to add to this, and that's really the which tools, if you're a new woodworker, which tools should you start with? Now, the first thing is the main thing really is, are you going to use power tools? Are you going to use hand tools? Are you going to use a combination of both? Most woodworkers I found, um, almost all woodworkers I've met in my life and have corresponded with and so on, are usually they use a combination of the two. Um, for myself, I really, in terms of power tools that are used for making joinery cutting, I've used a table saw and a drill press, which is, you can see back there, and those are really the two main power tools I've used. I would gladly get rid of my table saw, trade it in, what have you, for a bandsaw at this juncture, because I just simply don't use it very often anymore. And I didn't count the number of times I used it this year on one hand, and I think only once was that for a woodworking project. Actually, it was this, making this router plane here. I prepped the stock. Well, at least some of the stock I prepped with the table saw, because the board I was using was an off-cut piece of walnut that I've had around for years, and I was cutting around the knots and all that, all the other defects. But the first tool you need is a saw. And if you're not going to use a table saw, you need some type of panel saw. And I unfortunately don't have, pardon me just a second here. Forgive me for that. What I don't recommend is going the vintage for a saw, for many reasons. Mainly being that saws, if it needs restoration, saws are really, in my opinion, the hardest thing to restore, even for a newer, even for, I shouldn't say newer, even for a more accomplished woodworker. Saw restoration is can be very tricky, and it really takes a lot of practice. And I'm assuming that most new woodworkers aren't, firstly, you're not going to have the experience or the knowledge to restore a saw unless you, perhaps you worked as a carpenter for years and you got into making furniture. Then you might have some experience restoring a saw. Otherwise, I highly recommend getting a saw like this Stanley here that I've had for quite a long time. It's, the reason being, these saws don't need to be sharpened, and this style saw can be sharpened. I believe the teeth are hardened by induction, so there's not going to be a file that exists that I know of that you could purchase, at least, that is sharp enough to file these teeth. But what this saw offers, now I would actually, this is a smaller, like a toolbox, so I used to use this as an electrician. It's always nice to have a saw in your bag, in your vehicle with you. But I recommend a longer, more panel style saw, but this will work just fine. They're inexpensive, and they will rip and cross cut. You don't need to do any work to them. They they really they work right out of the box, and they will handle a lot of the woodworking tasks that a new woodworker is going to need it to do. What I mean by that is most new woodworkers aren't off the bat jumping into making a large, complicated piece of furniture. You're starting typically with boxes, small boxes. Bird houses are very popular. Planter boxes, things like that. Maybe a small bookcase. If you don't want to use power tools, which I'm not advocating for one way or the other, I personally have no issue with power tools. I don't think they diminish anything, especially table saws. As I said before, I don't necessarily enjoy the all of the manual labor that comes with woodworking by hand solely, because I work, I've worked manually enough in my life. I've I've worked physically for many years. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. Um, but if you enjoy it, awesome. I wish you all the best. There are certain aspects of working by hand, not just joinery, but all of the other the other physical aspects that I do like. But I don't want to spend 3 hours ripping boards and then churning them up and all that, which is why I do like table saws. Forgive me, I have oil on my hand. This saw hasn't been, I don't really work out in the field anymore, so this saw hasn't been used in quite a long time. So it needs to be cleaned. The next tool is you're going to need chisels. And once again, I don't necessarily recommend going the vintage route for, at least for all of them. Right here, these three chisels are the three that I use the most, which is why I have them hanging at my bench. And it's a 3/4, a 1/2 inch, and a 3/8. I found that you could pretty much do most of your average woodworking tasks can be accomplished with these three chisels. Style doesn't matter. I have socket. This is a Lee Nielsen socket chisel. This one here is a Stanley. Same design. Style doesn't matter. If you prefer full tang chisels like this Narex skew chisel here, great. Whatever feels comfortable for you is what works. There, I don't have a preference one way or the other. I find socket chisels comfortable. I like how they fit my hand. That's my only advocacy for those, so to speak. I don't think they're better or worse than anything else. The other thing before I continue, the reason I think that you should at least get one new chisel is because if you've never restored a chisel before, I think I've talked about this in the past. If you've never restored a chisel before, if you've never even sharpened one, going the vintage route, you might become frustrated. A lot of times, there's a lot of discussion on how flat do you want the back and all of that. I don't want to get into that at this time. Suffice to say, your back does not have to be, as I like to use the example, the mirror on a high-powered telescope. You don't need this ridiculous level of flatness on your chisels. like most tools that have an edge, you don't want to have any bow, and you don't really want any pitting if you can't help it. Um, a new chisel, generally, here again, I'm going to recommend getting one good quality new chisel. Even one of these Stanleys here, these are fine. They're not too expensive. They run about $20 or $25 each, I believe. But this will give you a good, maybe benchmark is the correct word to aspire to getting your vintage chisels, the chisels that maybe you bought on eBay or at a garage sale or something like that. You need some type of reference, point of reference, to get your chisels to where you want them. And I think one good chisel is the key to that. And I'm sure that many people will disagree with what I have to say, but I'm telling you from experience, as when I first started woodworking, when I first bought a house, I had, like most boys, I'd used the chisel before. I never prepped one. I never really got one sharp for woodworking. I knew how, and as an electrician, you always have a chisel or two with you. You're constantly notching out boards and stud bays and whatnot. But I was never concerned with it's just how sharp it was, and the flatness of the back, any of that. Those concerns show up when you're trying to perhaps maybe you're dovetailing or you're cleaning up a shoulder of a tenon. In the real world, they don't matter too much, but in the woodworking world, those things start to become a lot more important. So, like I said, a good frame of reference, one good tool that shows you what you're aspiring to with your vintage restorations is, to me, very helpful. The next thing you're going to need is a hammer like this. I don't recommend. Here's my old friend here. My hammer I've had a really long time. You're going to need a hammer like this as well, because if you're woodworking by hand or even with power tools, you're going to use nails at some point. That being said, while we're on that subject, I recommend cut nails or tapered nails. If you've seen those, search them out. There's a few companies that still make them. They're great for woodworking. I don't recommend using wire nails in woodworking. It's just me. But I find that they don't hold as well. So you will need a hammer like this 16-ounce claw hammer. As I said, this is an old friend. I've had it for many years. It's sad to see that when I actually, on a whim, looked up that hammer model number on the internet, and it was listed as vintage hammer. And I remember buying it new, 25 years or so ago, just to show you how quick you get old. But back on topic here. A hammer like this, which has a soft face and a hard face. These are good chisel hammers to me. They're not going to, in particular, if you have a wood handle on your chisel. Now I've seen carpenters whack on chisels all day. Even wood handles one with your typical 16-ounce claw hammer, and maybe they last. I don't know, but I wouldn't do it with my woodworking chisels. I'd use a hammer like this, even over a mallet, like a heavy carpenter's mallet. I think these are better. They're easier to control. They're a little bit lighter. There's certainly a place to have a carpenter's mallet. I have one right here, and they do come in handy at times. These mallets here, carver's mallet. I think you could get away without one, even if you carve. But this is really a pretty indispensable tool to have, and it also is good. You're getting your mortise, you're fitting your mortise and tenon, your dovetails. This is a good hammer to use rather than, once again, a heavy metal hammer. just to me much less likely to damage your work or your tools for that matter. The other before I go on, I'll say I don't want to. I'm not going to do this all in one video because I'm trying to keep these videos short. I know people don't. If I'm like anybody else, I don't want to watch a 25-minute video of a guy talking. I want to try to keep these videos to 20 minutes or less if possible. The next so going on, the next tool you're going to need is a square of some kind. I recommend a combination square. A 6-inch actually is probably better, which I do have a Starrett right here. And the reason I'm showing you this is this is a Craftsman that I've had for at least 20 years. And despite what anybody will tell you, this is more than accurate enough for most woodworking. A good way to figure that out is if you draw your pencil line, flip it over, and you make your mark again. I'm sorry, my bench is a little dirty. I've been cleaning up some things. But here, you can see that hopefully you can see here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do this backwards. But those lines are parallel. Forgive me, forgive my hand there. So yeah, this is certainly accurate enough for the average amateur home woodworker. And I've had, as I said, I've had this tool for many years. Hasn't lost any of its accuracy. It still works just fine. It will work on most of your projects. Next tool you need, marking knife. This is really, this was, I got this from Paul Sellers. From watching Paul Sellers, it works very well. It serves as, it's actually a nice pocket knife to keep in your, for everyday use as well. Very inexpensive. It's fine enough to mark joints, dovetails, etc. And the reason I didn't, the 6-inch Starrett I had, the reason I didn't, I don't want to recommend that, so to speak, because of the price. I had a 6-inch Craftsman, just like the one that one I showed you here, the 12-inch here, that I had it for years, and unfortunately it fell off of a ladder, and the accuracy was compromised when that happened, and it's sadly at the time I didn't realize it, and I'd used it on a project, and it was actually a planter box I made, a small planter box that I had outside, and I used it on a project. I was measuring with it, and for some reason everything was off. I was striving with it, and everything was off a little bit, and it dawned on me that it was probably not right. I tried to fix it, it just wasn't worth it. So I eventually got that Starrett. Next item is, this is the I don't want to use the word controversial, but next item is a hand drill, an electric one. I highly recommend you getting an electric drill. This one here, these run. You can get these on sale in a kit for about $100. I've seen them for $100 at Ace Hardware. It will be this, the impact driver, and this is also a hammer drill, which is, you'll find is very handy to have around your house if you don't own one already. This is a 12 volt. It is more than powerful enough for any woodworking task. I have here, this is a classic Stanley. This is a 923. I have to look here. Yeah, this is a 923 with an 8-inch sweep. Really, this is very common. These run on eBay usually for as low as $20 to maybe up to $50, depending. And here is the this is the 945 10-inch, another really common one, and they fall in the same price range. Great tools. They work very well. I was luckily enough given both of these. One I sort of found. The other one was given to me. But I don't recommend a new woodworker using them because, firstly, you need auger bits for them, the specialized augers. They work best in them. People will tell you that you can use spade bits in just about any bit in them. I found that is not necessarily true, and they don't work as well, those bits, with your typical chuck. Like a something like that, your little 1/4 inch. They don't seem to work as well in those tools. This drill here, this driver, is just as accurate, possibly even more accurate than any hand drill. It is inexpensive. You can use it anywhere besides your woodworking projects. It's handy to have around your house. It's small. It will go anywhere where that drill will go, or for that matter, this drill here, another. This replaces both of that and that, and it. Once again, these are good tools. I'm not disparaging them in any way. I'm saying if you're new, you might not necessarily want to go this route, because there's a lot of ways that hand tools are better than power tools. I'll be the first to admit it. This drill, those braces aren't one of them. They don't offer any discernible advantage over a power driver like this, other than the fact that you don't need a battery. Now, if you're trying to not use any electricity when you woodwork, maybe seek out these tools. If that doesn't matter to you, I'd suggest using one of these. It's to me, it is a better alternative, and it's just as good at any task that these tools are capable of doing. The one exception might be boring really large holes. Even then, like this only being a 12 volt, I had no issue boring an 1 1/4 hole with this, into a pressure treated board over the summer. I was running some wires for my mom, so had no problem. It went right through it. I have larger 18 volt drills that I normally would use in the field, but I didn't feel like carrying them because they're heavy. I think I'm going to call it a video for now. Hopefully tomorrow we'll get into your hand planes and some joinery planes, and a few of the other tools that I think are helpful for new woodworkers, and maybe once again we'll get into the discussion of what should we buy new, what should we restore, and I think. And I'll talk about a couple of accessories as well, a couple of the accessories that you want to have. And I think that I should be able to do, once again, keep the video in the 25-minute range. And I think I can really help narrow down some of those choices. Because getting started, you don't need a whole lot. I found that out after many years. And one of the big mistakes new woodworkers make is buying every tool right away, or some do at least. They go and you watch the videos, you read the magazines, you read the blogs, and you think you need all that stuff at once. When we're starting off, we don't need a whole lot because we're generally making small projects. So that's what I'm going to keep these videos focused on, is what are you going to need initially to get your first small projects up and running. So I hope you guys have a great night, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.